Hello, this is the Truth Speaks Network. I'm Dylan, and I'm joined by Chuck from the Ocelli Effect.
Right, Chuck Ocelli from the Ocelli Effect on UCY.TV radio. You can find it over there at UCY.TV/TOE. And that's what I broadcast 3 nights a week. But sometimes I stop in and talk to Dylan here on The Truth Speaks.
Yep, and today we'll be discussing Osama Bin Laden, and more specifically, his supposed death in 2011. So, Chuck, where do you want to start off with this? Do you want to start off with the fact that he was CIA, or do you want to start with his death?
Well, I think it's good to have a context on this, and I'm by no means any sort of expert on this, but having been someone that observes this type of stuff in the media, and also tries to gather information for himself as a journalist, is rather difficult. And I'm going to tell you right now, by the way, I got some storm clouds rolling in, so if we're interrupted by thunder claps and things, I'm sorry, but in my area that's the way it is right now.
I'm having those pass by too. In the next couple of minutes, I'll have some storm clouds over me.
Well, there you go. So so everybody knows, in case you hear a lot of noise and crackling and all that, that's not our fault. It's just the weather conditions for today. So the Bin Laden story is interesting because, as we all know, he's the the boogeyman who supposedly orchestrated the September 11th attacks, according to the official story. Okay, blah blah blah. We know this. The world's most wanted terrorist, despite the fact that the FBI's own website, didn't list it among the things that they wanted him for before his supposed death a few years back. But let's step back a little further. Many people are aware that earlier on, long before we were present in Afghanistan for over a decade now, the USSR, as it was engaged in a whole bunch of warfare in Afghanistan. Okay, and I'm being very general about this because there's no need to really opine or really disseminate all of the details about that history, because it's just a matter of fact. I mean, the Soviet Union was engaged in fighting with people there. The rise of the Taliban regime, which we or Taliban, depending on who you speak to, all of this stuff is a matter of historical record. It's very interesting, but here's the really strange part, and that is something that is often ignored. I mean, just like Saddam Hussein and many of these other Middle Eastern either strongmen, extremists, fundamentalists, depending on who they are,
or who you talk to.
What's that?
Or who you talk to.
Or who you talk to. But one thing that can be agreed upon almost universally is that at one point or another they all seem to receive support from either U.S. intelligence assets or U.S. military assets. Saddam Hussein, why did we support him? Supposedly because he was engaged in battle with one of our other boogeymen, which was Iran. Despite the fact that we had a whole lot to do with the evolution of the political structure and the rise of fundamentalism directly in that country. And I mean, forgetting about the presidents and different people that are supposed to be in charge over there. I mean, when we're talking about things like Mohammad Mossadegh, having been removed from power, and the rise of other regimes leading to the Ayatollah Khomeini. There was the hostage crisis when I was a younger person in the later 70s. I mean, Iran was one of those pressure points. I mean, long before W named the axis of evil, Iran was definitely part of that nebulous axis of Middle Eastern evil as far as the consciousness of the American people was concerned.
Hold on, Chuck. My brother keeps calling me.
No problem.
I'm here, Casey. I'm talking, though. Alright, I'm sorry.
Not a problem. My dogs might get upset during this too, so you might hear from them as well.
Yeah, you've probably already heard from my dog, and now you've heard from my brother, so
there we go.
You're going to end up hearing from most of my family by the end of the show.
Well, we might have lots of sound effects here. But I'm giving this as a matter of background, as a matter of context, so that we can understand something. Like I said, we supported Saddam Hussein because he was engaged in this, what do we call it, like a territorial struggle a border struggle with Iran at the time. So we did literally support and arm Saddam Hussein. The joke often is made, of course we knew he had chemical weapons at one time, we still had the receipt from when he bought them from us. This was, but there is a lot of truth to these types of memes that go around. So back to Afghanistan, like I said, when you deal with the Soviet Union at that time, and the idea of like proprietary warfare versus surrogate warfare, in many places in the world, the United States and the Soviet Union would sort of back and support different regimes, different factions and civil wars and things like this, in order to push their own political agendas and their own military agendas. Blah, blah, blah. We know this. This is all a matter of fact. But one thing that is often ignored in the Bin Laden story is that he was part of a foreign group which had come into Afghanistan during the time of the Soviet incursions into that country, which I defy anyone to truly explain why the Soviet Union was really engaged there in the first place. Just like, if you remove the September 11th narrative, if we can prove that that's a fake, or we can prove that that's, a forgery of some type, or a deception of some type, you have to assume that there is no real logical reason for United States assets to be in Afghanistan anymore. Of course, there is the discussion of pipelines and things like this, but we don't have time for all that today. But the Mujahideen, or the holy fighters, or depending on which translation you look at, they were essentially like holy warriors that were there to fight on behalf, as surrogates almost, for the oppressed Muslim people that were being oppressed by the Soviet Union. At that time, like I said, we actually armed them and pretty much backed his little group of foreign invaders that were in Afghanistan, supposedly standing up for the people. They were referred to as freedom fighters and things like this. And I've got to tell you that, depending on your perspective, freedom fighter and terrorist are interchangeable terms.
Yeah. Depends on who you talk to again.
Exactly. Well, and as, Napoleon is often quoted with this, but he's not the only one to have ever said that, those who win the wars, certainly, and I'm paraphrasing, those who win the wars are usually those who write history, and therefore only the winners write history. So if you're a winner in a battle and you have, vanquished an enemy, you consider them terrorists, savages, depending on your era, individuals that you helped, when you're dropping freedom bombs on civilians, you know what I mean, this kind of thing. Even if you look at contemporary stuff in our own history, you can see that it was, an effort to civilize the savages in the territories of the United States that led to that particular genocide of what we call Native Americans today, or or in my earlier years, something that we simply called Indians or Red Indians. Okay, those are offensive terms, blah blah blah. But it was a reality for me when I was younger. So let's just understand. We played cowboys and Indians, not cowboys and Native Americans. So moving forward again, we were backing this guy, in support in one way or another with intelligence assets, possibly even helping to arm them to some degree.
We funded him.
Right, we funded him. But what's interesting about that is there was no need for us to really fund him personally or his small band of people, which have since been identified as this Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda.
Which I certainly call Al-Qaeda, because all the time they're infiltrated by and controlled by double agents, people who are American assets, people who are working on behalf of the American intelligence assets. And this is the kind of thing that we see as very much in the fashion of the old surrogate-style warfare. Like I said, we did this in Cambodia, we did this in Laos, we did this in South America, where, let's just say the communist-backed troops would fight the American-backed troops, and we wouldn't have to get too terribly involved except to send some special forces training people in there, explain to them how to use the modern weapons that we had supplied them, things like this.
We did it in Iran, too.
Oh, of course. But Iraq is where I was at before, because that's who we were supporting for the longest time. We've gone back and forth with Iran, though. I mean, the installation of the Shah of Iran is you know, has American intelligence fingerprints all over it. You know, he was educated in the West and all this, and this is part of the public history. You know, but the agency history on this, you can even go to, I believe you can go to CIA.gov and even read a history of basically the terrorist plot that overthrew the government, installed the Shah of Iran, and then you only need to look at open source history. I mean, contemporaneous newspapers, radio broadcasts, and everything else about, you know, the extraction of the Shah at the time of his death. I think it was at the end of the 70s or the beginning of the 80s when he was finally completely removed from power there. But again, this is, you know, but this is symptomatic. So I find it extremely hard to believe that although everybody likes to flip sides all the time and everything else, we have another issue with Bin Laden, which is well known and is documented. I mean, the guy, you know, spent time in the military. I mean, we've seen this on numerous 9/11 truth videos where they try and explain, you know, the problems with the narrative. And even a propagandist like Michael Moore can't ignore the fact that the Carlyle Group, you know, was populated by members of the Bin Laden family as well as the Bushes, and things like this. And their concern obviously was military contracting and things like this. I mean, leads to discussions like that. I mean, on the day 9/11 occurred, George H.W. Bush was actually standing at a meeting of the Carlyle Group with members of the Bin Laden family, which is a large family, by the way. Now, who are the Bin Laden family, and why is it that they would be mingling with people like George H.W. Bush, or any of these people, or you know, or Saudi Arabian royalty, etc., etc.? They're a very wealthy construction concern. They are involved in very large, very costly construction projects internationally. They're not like just, you know, in one country or in one region even. You can find, you know, their company or sub-companies of theirs, you know, participating in things like the building of bridges, the building of bases, the building of all sorts of structures. I mean, large projects. So, you know, when you talk about $1 million, $1 billion construction companies, when it comes to the Bin Ladens and their, you know, and their legitimate business interests, they are involved in plenty of very large-scale sort of productions. I know that since the September 11th, you know, incidents, and many people having documented, you know, how even though there was no one allowed to fly and you had to have special permission from the FAA and all that stuff, various members of the Bin Laden family were allowed to leave the United States, which was pretty interesting, considering that, you know, if they believed immediately that this guy was responsible, don't you think that the first people they would have tried to pull in would have been members of his family to question about where he was, what he was doing, what he may have been involved with, etc., etc.
I don't think they ever believed that he was part of it, and I don't think to this day they believe that.
Oh yeah, but this is where you call them out on their own BS, because you know, if that is the case, I mean, let's be honest. If I have, you know, 10 brothers and sisters, and we all have business concerns, and we all have contact with one another at some point or another, and I committed some large mass murder, which they're trying to pin on this one guy, you know, 3,000 people die. Don't you think that the FBI would very much like to speak to the members of my family to see what they knew at the very least?
Definitely.
Yeah, but these people were allowed to leave. They were given special permission to leave by the State Department, etc., etc. So, yeah, and you can find all sorts of evidence for this, and I'm not even going to say that, again, I'm not an expert on it, but it is one of those things that that has always made me question this.
You don't have to be an expert on it. You just have to know the basics about the topic.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm trying to provide that storyline here, but it's just, it's so hard because, okay, so you've got this guy who is involved in, you know, billion-dollar industry, you know, huge money concerns, large family, obviously could probably fund his own armies and things like that, did that for a while. and actually participated in these little crusader type operations where he was going from place to place and offering himself up as a leader of a band of holy warriors. Then there is the supposed Al Qaeda council, which involves the Egyptian doctor Al Zawahiri, I believe his name is, and this forms an interesting sort of multifaceted, nebulous kind of terrorist narrative. Now, this all having been said, and let's fast forward to just post September 11th. Of course, there was an absolute cry for vengeance among the American public. There was a lot of let's call it false flag waving, because the tons of Chinese flags that would inundate every place that you went to that could be purchased at various price levels for just about anyone who wanted to prove that they were a real American. I mean, at one point, I mean, even places where you worked in retail at that time started issuing flag pins to every employee just so that they would have them. And, and stickers were being given to regular customers and employees at places just to be sure that someone didn't think for one reason or another that you weren't in support of all of those who had been victims. You weren't in support of our country at that time. There was a very serious xenophobic, outrage among the American populace. So enter the immediacy, and I do mean the immediacy because I wound up at first I didn't have a television, I had a radio in front of me, and I was able to travel a little bit, and I tried to get into New York City that day to assist after the buildings collapsed, because after the two towers collapsed, I should say, because later in the day the Building 7 would collapse. But after the two towers collapsed, a general call was sort of sent locally for people to come and assist, to try and dig out survivors, to try and help the people that had been injured. And I attempted to do that, but the island of Manhattan, a lot of people don't realize that New York City is actually on an island. The island of Manhattan was closed for those of us in New Jersey at one point. Some of us got through, and I did spend the next many weeks feeding supplies like water, masks, gloves, and things into there for the civilian volunteers that didn't have firefighter gear, etc., etc. So this was very close, very personal to me. I was able to look at the enormous debris cloud over the Manhattan skyline from across the river, and I've got to tell you that that it was a big, serious shock and awe for us. Although that term would later on be used in the Blitz sort of attack on Iraq and everything else, I believe the first shock and awe was that day. But even going back to the media coverage, when I went home that night, and many people, just like during the JFK assassination, a lot of things stopped in our country, and people just had started to stare at televisions and continue to watch the coverage, watch the progress, and wait for the word of some sort of justice, wait for our military to mobilize and to strike back against those who had wounded us so badly. But within minutes, on many national networks, and I do mean the more older dinosaur networks, not the CNNs necessarily, although they were covering it, not the MSNBC and the Fox News per se. However, Fox News did go live and continuous and commercial free for a while. NBC, ABC, CBS, all of the most established television networks went to full-time coverage, replays, and analysis. Discussions of terrorism, discussions of what was going on. The president breaking in. To make announcements. We're all familiar with W standing on the quote-unquote ground zero site and saying through a bullhorn, the people that did this are going to hear from you because I hear from you. I'm paraphrasing again here, but these are iconic images. They even at one point, before the days of like Facebook memes and things like this, in the culture, an archetype was put out very reminiscent of the raising of the flag at Iwo Jima. There was a raising of a flag at the Ground Zero site, the discovered flag, which is now reportedly hanging at the 9/11 memorial site. But they did raise that flag from the rubble, and then it was depicted in the newspapers and magazines on covers. And I'm telling you, you can find this: U.S. News and World Report, Time, Life, all of these types of magazines and companies push this iconic image of us rising up out of the rubble, the country still standing, we're going to stand strong together, all of that kind of stuff. But during this, you know, despite the fact that I couldn't sleep that night, I remember watching at some point, and I can't state exactly what time of day, but I do know it was within 24 hours. There were representatives of the Taliban government in Afghanistan answering the question of whether they would turn over Bin Laden, whether they knew where Bin Laden was, because almost instantaneously, and I do mean probably less than 60 minutes after the second tower fell, you know, we were confronted with the commentators already beginning to parrot the idea that you know, Osama bin Laden may very well have been behind this. And that is either some miraculous journalistic feat, or, you know, something that was simply echoing, because we did know at that time that these networks used to watch each other. They would state what each other was reporting and everything else.
They probably do that now, too.
Oh, I know they do, but the odd thing now is that generally you see them say, you know, Fox News is reporting if they don't have a source for themselves. But with this particular thing, and you always saw that then, I mean, even if let's just say the national Fox feed was all turned over to the New York cameras on that day, they would say Fox News New York is reporting. You know, and when the plane crash occurred in Pennsylvania, or the supposed plane crash occurred in Pennsylvania, the alleged plane crash, because I don't know what to say about that. I don't know how a plane disappears, and, you know, when it only crashed and everything else, but another story for another day. Even there, though, you would see this is from, you know, Fox's Pittsburgh affiliate, you know, W whatever. This is what they generally do. They even ascribe, you know, reports and speculations about incidents and information as it's coming in as being from a particular source, you know, even within their own networks.
So,
but they didn't do that when it came to the Bin Laden thing. It was just sort of one of those blurted out speculations. Perhaps Osama Bin Laden had something to do with this. And then they immediately brought up the, you know, the bombing of the two navies, the Cole, the USS Cole, the two embassies in Africa, the two African embassy bombings that were supposedly linked to Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. So immediately he was brought up as a suspect in the media. And it wasn't like, you know, well, this person is reporting or anything else. It was just a general speculation. I'm not sure if it just hit the echo chamber and was passed around, you know, or if this was a, you know, a preconceived notion on their part.
They could have come up with it after watching TV, I mean.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but that's what I mean, is that either we were looking at the echo chamber of the news at that time where, you know, if NBC reported it, then ABC trusted it, then CBS trusted it, then Fox trusted it, so they're all saying the same thing within about 5 minutes.
No, I think maybe, no, I meant maybe the government thought it, maybe the government made that up after watching whichever network reported it first.
Yeah, but here's the deal, it was way too fast.
Agreed.
It was way too fast. You know, within the hour, I would say, and believe me, there was just shock. There was confusion. You know, reporters who were voicing over this stuff were looking at screens, and even reporters in New York City who could see this stuff with their own eyes were confused as to what they were seeing. You can definitely find, if you can find the footage still. I know I used to have it, and I gave it to somebody who wanted the New York affiliates from another part of the country. They wanted to see exactly what came out of the New York affiliates that day. So I gave them my tapes. But here's the thing about that. You know, there was confusion on the ground. Even people who had their eyes on the situation, and there was a
We lost it.
we lost the feed.
Yeah, the feed just stopped. Sign in. Okay, we're back.
So we're beginning again from the beginning.
Yeah, no. No, it's continuing the stream.
Oh, excellent. All right. Well, I guess we got lost there for a minute, but we're back. Uh, so, like I'm explaining, is the day of September 11th. The way that the narrative emerged that Bin Laden was a suspect within 24 hours. The news people and a press conference was arranged with representatives of the Taliban government, who were basically saying that they had no idea what was going on. They had no idea where Bin Laden was. He used to be there. They didn't know anything, but they weren't going to turn him over to us anyway. So this is why I mentioned the entire sort of outrage that was among the populace was obviously prevalent in the media, was prevalent among politicians who were scrambling to any microphone they could find, to condemn and put their prayers out to the people of New York and Washington, D.C., and then later on Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This was happening, real time. So it was quite confusing. Like I said, watching from the New York stations, because I was in New Jersey at the time, a little later on, and was able to have the recordings of what happened that morning. We did see that, while these reporters are sitting there and trying to discuss the fires and how they weren't aware of how a plane could have struck the building, and it seemed to be a perfectly clear day and everything else, they're commentating, they're making comments, I should say, while the image of one burning tower is on our screens. Contrary to popular belief, the first plane strike was not broadcast live. It was sent in later, and I believe CNN aired it first via, I'm trying to remember the name of the news agency, but there was a.
I think it was BBC.
No, it wasn't BBC that first got it out there.
Oh wait, which one did BBC get wrong? Was that World Trade Center 7?
Oh, the BBC, yeah. The BBC had a reporter on the screen telling us that the tower had already fallen. The building 7 had already fallen. Let me correct myself. Despite the fact that there it is visible behind it. So that was, one of those interesting anomalies from that day.
That was comical, though.
Oh, kind of, but, it's very hard to find that footage nowadays.
Yeah, I'm sure some people still have it, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, I gave away, and I had VHS tapes of this stuff at the time. My honest reaction was, I was buying it. I was buying the whole thing, honestly. And I was saving it because at that time I was making a collection of videotapes that I wanted to save for my kids to be able to see years later. And I knew that this was a big historical event, that's for certain.
So do you have those tapes still?
Well, no, like I said, I handed them off to somebody else who wanted to do a documentary, and I haven't seen them emerge yet, although I have seen plenty of the clips that look very similar to what I had on videotape, even with a couple of the let's just say, flaws that I had in some of my tapes and everything. I've seen them up online in a couple of places, so I'm not sure if he just sort of passed them around and gave up on his film or not. Come to think of it, I haven't thought about that in a while, so I should probably check on it.
But should we speak on the death of Bin Laden now?
Well, here's the fascinating part to me is that you know, we then have, you know, this entire sort of manhunt that's going on. We in the meantime invade Afghanistan. You know, boots drop on the ground. The American people cheer, and I tell you again, you know, fully vehemently waving their, you know, Chinese-made American flags and wearing their pins and sticking their cars with stickers. And there was even the phenomena of a window-mounted flagpole where people had American flags coming out of the sides of their vehicles and everything else. Okay, so you know, we were angry as a people, thinking that we had been hit and unjustly, and it was these, you know, these terrorists that we didn't understand, because we never did understand them. But here's the fascinating part about that. Then Al Jazeera, which is now, you know, transmuted into a whole other network, at that time was only the Arab-speaking sort of CNN. And they started broadcasting tapes that were supposed to have been delivered by courier and everything else, where Bin Laden is making statements. So there's inconsistency in those tapes. Some of them he looks older than he should. Some of them he looks younger than he should. The general fallacy that a lot of people latch onto is the Fat Bin Laden tape, where he's, you know, sitting in a room with a bunch of people and he doesn't look right at all. He looks too dark. He's using the wrong hand. You know, and he looks too heavy to be Bin Laden, because obviously he was kind of an emaciated, 6'6", diabetic, you know, Saudi Arabian guy. Well, the problem there is that the aspect ratio is incorrect, because it was originally filmed or originally recorded on a PAL format as opposed to an NTSC format, and when you properly adjust this, he looks quite a bit like the Bin Laden character we've come to know. But there are inconsistencies with this Bin Laden character in these supposed tapes that are supposed to have been released, making claims, making statements, making confessions, at one point praising the hijackers but not claiming responsibility, you know, and all of this sort of convoluted stuff. Now, here is the issue with that. You know, I defy most people out there who are hearing what I have to say to be able to understand Arabic and have an independent source for a translation on those tapes. I have talked to more than one Arabic speaker about them, and they've told me that you know, that the English, which is being, you know, shown as, like, you know, a closed captioning type effect on the screen all the time, is inaccurate, but for different reasons. You know, there's a lot of nuances to the Arabic language that are missed here and everything else. But look, those arguments again are endless. So we're still dealing with this, you know, with this boogeyman who's, like, you know, the most wanted man in the world. But again, I tell you, the FBI never added it to the list of things that he was wanted for during his supposed lifetime. So we then are greeted with a wonderful story about his actions in an area of Afghanistan called Tora Bora. Okay, so our military assets, which have forged an alliance with the supposed Northern Alliance Group, and I'm using air quotes when I say that, the Northern Alliance Group in Afghanistan, who are fighting the evil Taliban, who, by the way, reduced the opium production in their country to almost nothing, which is not the case as we speak. After we have been there for over a decade, we're not only allowing this to go on, but we are actually helping them to protect their crops, protect the people that cultivate this stuff, and everything else. And this is, again, part of the public record. If you don't believe me, then just enter into a search engine, U.S. troops protect opium crops. You'll see it. You'll see it even on the mainstream this was admitted to. Okay? But anyway, back to the story. They have him trapped in a mountainous range called Tora Bora. There is no escape. Our super advanced military has this terrible, awful, you know, and I'm going to use some very nasty terms here, but everybody was screaming, you know, We need to get the towelhead terrorists. We need to punish them. We need to get this guy. He was the leader. You know, they wanted to see him publicly executed, and let's bring him back to New York City. This type of debate went on in the mainstream media, across talk radio streams, and terrestrial radio, on the internet. And if you don't believe me, I'm telling you, go check the archives. This was literally something that went on. There were odd little social, you know, constructs that went on there where people had terrorist hunting licenses in the backs of their pickup trucks. There was people that had, you know, shooting range targets with Bin Laden's face on them. There were popular dartboards sold at that time. All this kind of stuff to sort of ratchet up the, you know, the anti-Arab, anti-Muslim narrative, with Bin Laden's face being the, you know, the poster boy for it. So he's trapped in this mountainous range in Tora Bora, right? And we bomb the hell out of it. We send our troops in, and suddenly he escapes. So again, the 6'6" Saudi Arabian guy, who, you know, might kind of stick out like a sore thumb in Afghanistan or anywhere else, you know, the 6'6" sheik who is, you know, apparently in kidney failure and everything else at this time, is able to elude the most advanced military in the world in a desert region when he's trapped in a mountain range. Okay then, moving forward, we don't hear very much about Bin Laden again, except the occasional memes, the supposed release to Al Jazeera of new tapes, new audio tapes, new videotapes that are brought by courier, that are smuggled, that are dropped off anonymously. Some of those are completely inconsistent. American media turns around and says that the tapes exist in some cases, but refuses to broadcast them out of fear that there's some sort of signal to other sleeper terrorist cells. And we are then very much in the style of the MH Flight 370, treated on the national news to a daily deluge of stuff about these 19 hijackers, and then even the 20th hijacker, Zacharias, you know, I can't remember his name, but he's the only one to have been tried. He was the 20th hijacker. Anyway, so we're treated to their life stories, much again ignoring the fact that a couple of these people that are identified in the world media stream at that point wind up standing up and basically announcing to the world that they are still alive, in fact. All right, so again, how does a 6'6" Saudi Arabian who you know needs dialysis to keep his kidneys going, he's a diabetic and everything else, how does he survive and escape and slip through the fingers of the most advanced military units in the world? Well, there begins your question.
And not to mention the question, how did he pull off the logistical aspects of the 9/11 attacks?
Well, right, and the claim has been for many years that he utilized what they call satellite phones, which are not like cellular phones. They directly can tap into satellite networks and reach other telephone lines. So this is the plausible possibility that they give us. But if you look at the ranges, the areas, notice we've never been treated to you know, to a layout of any mountain fortress area. I mean, we were showed stuff in Tora Bora that you know, that was positively Stone Age, and you know what? Most of Afghanistan, in reality, was very underdeveloped or undeveloped. So you know, requiring electricity, batteries, all these types of things to have a mobile unit. Again, how do you slip through the fingers of the most advanced military in the world and not leave behind supplies, evidence, things that we could show to the world? Look, Bin Laden is here. We have his, you know, we have his cameras, we have his clothes, we have his DNA, we have some of his people. He got away, but we got somebody. Well, then people start talking about the whole Guantanamo Bay thing, how we've captured many people. You'll never hear their names. There are still people there, even though it's supposed to be closed. You know, Camp X-Ray, all that kind of good stuff. You know, and this leads to a whole lot of other fun. But don't worry, by the time anybody starts to question this stuff, like I said, among the general public, we're then treated to the war in Iraq, and the new boogeyman who could, although Bin Laden coordinated something and got lucky, Saddam Hussein is going to use weapons of mass destruction against us. So this is why we need to preemptively go in there and decapitate that regime. Of course, we find out later that all of the precedents that they utilized, all of the arguments that they forwarded into the public mindset, all of these things, almost to a letter, are found to be absolutely false. You have the very questionable narrative of gassing his own people, killing his own people, and being basically a dictator/terrorist on his own population. Now, we then are treated to quite a few years of pretty much ignoring the Bin Laden thing, unless you're talking about the truther movement. The mainstream laid off of it after a few months, I believe, and really laid off of it after we got involved in Iraq. So now we see a lot of stuff start to come out. And like I said, even though Michael Moore is a propagandist and is not a real trustable source, if he points a camera at the sky and tells you it's blue, he might be right. So if you look at a movie like Fahrenheit 9/11, you can get a very quick sort of idea about some of the nonsense that was, part of the public record. And again, even though he's a softball pitching propagandist, the guy at least made some good points there. Of course, various other people like Webster Tarpley, Mike Rupert, even, just passed away recently, but Mike Rupert was involved. All of these individuals that were talking about stuff, Kevin Ryan, when they discuss the interlocking sort of, fairy tale that's been made up to propagate the war on terror, obviously the Bin Laden character is important. So let's go forward again. Barack Obama is now president. We're through with the W regime and everything else. Obama, what you got to say for him here is that he's constantly involved with things that really I think the neoconservative type people out there ought to enjoy. I mean, drone strikes, sort of wiretapping, unorthodox sort of attacks on individuals. It doesn't matter if we get other people at the wedding, as long as we kill the guy who's the son of somebody that we said sent an email to a bomber, who is completely mentally deranged.
It doesn't matter if we kill a 16-year-old kid, as long as we get his suspected terrorist father.
Oh, right, all of that. Isn't it beautiful? So we're treated to all that kind of stuff. And I was kind of surprised. I thought the Bin Laden myth was going to be allowed to perpetuate for a very long time. I thought that eventually somebody would have to say, look, we have to assume he's dead, and that would be that.
We should have assumed he was dead. He had kidney failure.
Well, yeah, but again, you can be kept alive if you're able to get to dialysis and things like this.
With all the movement he was having between areas to escape us, would have been a little difficult for him to get dialysis, I would think.
Well, yeah, this is part of the problem, and this is why it has given rise to the concept that he wasn't even alive at the time of the September 11th attacks.
I think he was. I think he died around November of 2001, or late in 2001. Definitely before 2011.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I'll tell you this, the best evidence, I would concur with you. I wouldn't say it's a certainty, it's not an absolute thing, but you know what, there's so many holes in the story. There's so many problems with the official narrative about this, and there's so many contradictions, like I said again, in their own sources, regarding his medical condition, regarding his movements. I mean...
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's no problem, but it seems most logical to me that either this guy was already dead quite some time ago, or there was many one of them. Dogs are barking at something.
There are some people that say the guy didn't exist. I think he existed. I just don't think he had as much involvement as we give him credit for.
Oh no, he certainly existed. You know, the CIA doesn't cut checks to non-existent people unless somebody can cash them.
No, but they do cast votes for people that don't exist.
Oh yeah, but that's just a vote. That's not spending money. That's making money. You know, look, at one point this guy was absolutely an asset. You know, they've even admitted to backing him because he was obviously, you know, our enemy of our enemy, stuff like this. So there was a point at which the guy clearly existed. At the time of the September 11th attacks, I don't know.
And that's the debate.
You know,
but I don't.
Also, I'm going to say that the whole, like, SEAL Team 6 thing, and you can take a look at the Hollywood movie if you like. But if you want to really have fun with it, you take a look at the you know, the news reports at the time. Initially, the Obama administration released these still photographs of the supposed Situation Room in the White House, where you can clearly see Barack Obama, you know, Secretary of State Clinton, and a whole bunch of other interesting people that are involved in the administration. Fixated on something, apparently, with Hillary Clinton putting her hand over her mouth as if she is shocked to see something happen, which I doubt anyway, even if she was able to see something happen. And the idea was floated out there that they were watching a live feed of the operation on the ground in Pakistan, where, you know, look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to find the official narrative about that. SEAL Team 6, one of the most elite and up to that point lesser known sections of the Navy SEALs, is supposed to have gone in there without the permission of the Pakistani government directly, without the knowledge of even the local police, and have landed out of nowhere and gone in there and supposedly shot Bin Laden, who was sitting there with nothing more than, like, I don't know, a laptop and a couple of family members, and killed him in an area of Pakistan, which was, you know, rather let's say, under-examined up to that point. Now, the funny thing is, and again, I say that I believe that he did live for some months after the September 11th attacks, and wouldn't be surprised if you're absolutely correct about that November date, because I knew many Pakistani nationals at the time, and, you know, they would tell me themselves that they were aware that he was in that section of the country, an area called Peshawar, and I knew that when, you know, our own law enforcement people, international agencies, military agencies, couldn't seem to even begin to imagine where this guy could have fled to. They imagined that he went to Qatar, they imagined he might have gone to Iran, he might have gone to Syria, he might have gone to Saudi Arabia, he may very well be hiding in Pakistan. At one point, even the silliness was floated that he had snuck out dressed as a woman. Okay? Oh, I'm not kidding you. If you dig deep enough, you can find news reports where they say that there's a possibility that Bin Laden escaped from Afghanistan into Pakistan dressed in drag.
I don't think he was there to begin with.
Well, we don't think he was where to begin with?
At the site where he supposedly died.
Oh, I don't know about that site in particular. And, you know, if this was part of the reality of the situation, I don't think there's anybody outside of the operators that were responsible and the people that were in charge of that operation that would have ever known where that site was. So, again, this leads me to the idea that this is either something that has been inflated or created in order to, you know, give people a story they can hang on to. Satisfaction is finally given to the people who wanted justice for the victims of September 11th. But, you know, we get into weirder areas outside of the fact that SEAL Team 6 is there. We shouldn't really know about it. They floated this, you know, image of Hillary and you know, Barry sitting there looking at a screen, which was not a live feed. They later on had to admit it wasn't a live feed, that there was no live feed coming from a SEAL team, for God's sake, you know, in Pakistan, coming directly to Washington. Okay, so Come on. But anyway, even after that, then we have to endure other fun facts. Bin Laden's body, they took a DNA sample and dumped his body at sea. They even, at the earliest stages of explaining that, stated that they had seen incontrovertible evidence that he was actually dead and that it was him, that they'd done these comparative DNA tests.
Cool.
At one point, the idea was floated that the photographs had actually gotten back to the United States of Bin Laden dead.
Cool. I would love to see those.
Yeah, but be careful, because a lot of this stuff is floated out there on the internet. You can probably find pictures that are supposedly Bin Laden dead.
Now, I would like to see official pictures brought out.
Yeah, but see, I'm trying to point out to you that the official statements, the official releases here are not trustworthy either. So,
oh, I know that.
I mean, it's silliness.
But at least it would add credence to their story if they would put out something. I mean, no pictures just makes people who wouldn't be suspicious more suspicious.
Well, look, if I told you that I was Jimi Hendrix's best friend, despite the fact that I was born, after he was dead, and I could produce you a Photoshop picture of him and I standing there with our own arms over each other's shoulders, it doesn't make my story any better.
No, it doesn't. But what I'm saying is, to the people that don't look into these things, that would sound, if they produced a Photoshop, it would look, for them at least, possibly real, and for us it still wouldn't be true, but I mean,
that's the point here, is that so long as the the mighty TV or the trustworthy internet source tells people that this is the story, they accept it. They don't even read past headlines generally. Some of them look at pictures only. People complain about the literacy rate sometimes. It really doesn't matter if people aren't going to use their ability to read anything.
That's a problem in America in general. People don't like to read.
Well, right. Critical thought is dead anyway, so it wouldn't matter if they read until,
critical thought,
there were no more trees.
Critical thought was killed by Common Core.
Yeah, I wish that was true, because it would mean that there are still plenty of people walking around that have that ability, but there's plenty of people much older, much out of the reach of those educational constructs, or even the more recent politically correct stuff that was going on for the past decade and everything else.
That's true, but I mean, what I'm saying is they're further killing it. They're completely wiping out critical thinking.
Well, for the simple-minded, there is nothing better than beating a dead horse. Okay, so why not drive it into the ground just a little further?
Oh, they're killing it for my generation.
Oh yeah. They definitely are, and they want to make sure.
That's the goal. They want to kill it for my generation, because if my generation learns to think, oh, they're screwed.
Right, and meanwhile, I'm telling you about a very cursory sort of look at this. I mean, but back to SEAL Team 6. Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. But I mean, this is just an overview. I urge anybody that's listening to us to turn around and take what I'm saying and see if you can prove what I'm saying or what I'm not saying here. Okay.
Prove what we're saying false. We'd love it.
Look for what I'm saying. And a matter of fact, some of what I'm saying may be inaccurate, because you know what? It's very hard to sort through the BS here. Okay, and I admit that about this subject especially.
It's almost impossible.
I think it's meant to be that way, but that is yet another issue. So back to SEAL Team 6, this elite, Navy fighter, Special Forces guys, awesome killing machines who are highly, highly trained, go in there, they tap out this one sickly guy who happens to be a pretty good sized target at 6'6" again, probably dressed in his nice white pajamas like everybody likes to picture him and everything else. They take him and dump him at sea.
For some reason.
They first try to float the idea that this is in accordance with Islamic dogma, that someone should be buried at sea, and yet I can't find someone who is a Muslim that tells me that burying someone at sea is part of any standard practice whatsoever.
And I should also add, when did we start caring about religious freedom?
Well, it's not even about the freedom. It's about, so what you're telling me is that we have one of the greatest mass murderers of the 21st century in our hands, dead or alive. We're not going to put him on public display.
And we're not going to do an autopsy?
You know, for God's sake, there were pictures of John Dillinger that were, you know, circulated among print media, and this guy was a bank robber. You know, what does that tell you? Anyway, so the thing is this. Yeah, trust us. We dumped the body, but we have DNA.
Yeah, well, we're not going to show you that DNA. Don't be ridiculous. We're not going to show you proof that he's dead. I mean, he only killed 3,000 plus Americans,
Well,
allegedly, but well, you don't deserve any proof that we killed him.
Well, but even if they did show us the DNA, it's not like they shouldn't have it. After all, he was in a military hospital in Dubai, you know, shortly before the September 11th incident.
And after the September 11th incident.
And after, you know, being treated by nephrologists who were there and under the supervision of our CIA. So we should have some genetic material to be able to produce if we wanted to prove that at some point or another we had him, you know, at arm's length, at least close enough to draw some blood. I don't know. That's a matter of speculation on my part. But it seems logical, doesn't it?
It almost seems to be a fact, because if I'm not mistaken, I could be completely mistaken, but when you're in a hospital for dialysis and diabetes, don't they do blood tests to make sure your levels are okay? So they would have DNA evidence. It would not be hard to put that out and attempt to silence us.
Well, right, and the diabetes, definitely they're constantly doing, you know, blood tests, even if it's finger sticks. Believe me, that's plenty enough to get a DNA profile. And the actual operation of dialysis causes all of one's blood to be basically removed from their body systematically, filtered, and then replaced into the body. So
so they would have blood. I mean,
they would certainly have access to plenty of his blood. I'm sure somebody could have pulled a couple of hairs out of somewhere. I'm sure we could get DNA of all types, fingernail scrapings, whatever we needed while he was under the care of a doctor.
Yeah, so it would have silenced a lot of conspiracy theorists to just show a little proof.
Yeah, but you see, again, these things I think are meant to confound us all so that we argue with each other and really can't accomplish the creation of a straight narrative. You know, a straight story here we can't get, because even amongst ourselves, we have things that I think sometimes are floated as facts that are not necessarily facts.
Well, that's what the entire truth movement, I mean, when you look at it, we float around stuff that may not be true all the time. Not us specifically, but us in the truth movement float around things all the time. I mean, you've got people who say there were 12 different gunmen at JFK, and that's completely preposterous.
Well, right, but some of it is the mistakes of researchers, okay, and some of it is researchers trying to back theses that they choose, okay, where it's like, you know, it's a precognitive thing where they've decided upon a narrative, they've decided that the Mafia has done it, so they look for Mafia suspects, and, you know, even when they find that Carlos Marcello supposedly admitted to being involved in the JFK assassination, they don't take into account that that he was already in the throes of Alzheimer's at the time and was completely convoluted on a bunch of things, despite the fact that they did have him on tape making that confession. Carlos Marcello is not the guy who organized, arranged, or had anything realistic to do with the hit. It's that simple. It's just a guy, you know, who's got Alzheimer's who was making claims. I mean, you know, you talk to enough Alzheimer's patients, you'll find probably, you know, if you talk to 100 of them, I'm sure you can find 5 of them that think that they were Elvis Presley and a couple of them that think that they were Mickey Mouse at one point. It doesn't mean that it's real.
But back on...
But there are mistakes, okay? There are mistakes, but then there is purposely interjected disinformation. And this, I believe, is done by the official bodies in a lot of cases. The U.S. government doesn't want the clear-cut story about this to be known. They're quite satisfied with the idea that among the majority of the population, it's acceptable that we were attacked by Middle Eastern terrorists, and that those bastard cowheads were our enemies because they hate our freedoms, and we go along with those narratives that the neocons have pushed. Just the other day, okay, sort of along these lines, about this recent swap for a couple of guys, one of our military guys, his name I don't even want to bring up because I don't even want to ring on that particular meme at this time. It is definitely a Jones Corporation featurette, so I don't even want to get involved in it. But we all know what I'm talking about, where Taliban assets were supposedly traded for U.S. assets in the Afghani sort of conflict, okay? So I'm not even thinking about this because I just looked at it as another piece of political play.
I haven't even paid attention to the story, honestly.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I almost think of it as a fake controversy at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm getting tired of all these fake controversies.
But that's the thing. It's meant to keep those of us who actually care about the truth busy. So this is why I don't want to engage in it too much. But I'll tell you this quick little story. I went to a store yesterday, okay? I had to go pick up something. I had to go pick up something for someone, okay? So I go into a store, and I look down an aisle, and I see a guy very animated, yelling, kind of getting all upset with the kid who's stocking shelves. That's the aisle I have to go down. So I walk around, and I go to another aisle. And before I can make it around to the other side of the aisle to kind of avoid these two having this intense conversation, the guy comes and finds me. Okay? And starts yelling at me about how, those Arabs are going to bring the war here, and I can't believe that Muslim that they got for president now, is making deals, and all that's going to do is bring us another September 11. And this guy went on for a good 5 minutes, and I know, listening to me, it's kind of easy to imagine somebody babbling for 5 minutes, but this is not something that happens randomly, generally speaking, when you go out in public, that someone who's never seen you before, you've never seen before, begins to walk up to you and starts, yelling at you and trying to get you to agree that we're in this awful state and we're going to have another September 11th.
I think we will, but the way we see September 11th.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you're talking about another, and I despise the term false flag, but
why do you despise the term?
Because it's been overutilized. People have applied it to school shootings now. They've applied it to any mass incident which is played upon by the media, which is played upon by the politicians in order to evoke sympathies or in order to push agendas.
Well, isn't that the definition of the term?
No, the definition of the term really is, where it comes from is the idea of masking the attacker. Even though it was, Israeli military assets that attacked the USS Liberty, nobody wanted that known. It would have probably never been known. They would have blamed it on someone else claiming another flag. It basically, it's something that's being conducted under the table, and then, but it's usually in conjunction with, the people that are being attacked ostensibly. But sometimes there are things that are simply seized upon and utilized as the same, but are not actually provoked, orchestrated, organized by, the victims as well. All right. So, if you think of September 11th as a completely false flag thing, then what you're saying is that our country decided to do it, and they allowed other people or supported other people to do it on our behalf to attack ourselves. Whether using those assets, and that's fine, but not everything is a false flag.
No, I agree. Not everything is. It is overused, but I think 9/11 is the classic false flag.
Well, it literally comes from the idea of raising another country's flag on a naval vessel in order to have responsibility for that naval vessel's actions blamed on whichever country's flag you're putting up, despite what the true controller of that vessel is.
Then what should we start calling these events?
Well, they're more like, false narratives that are developed out of real events. Because here's the damage. It's not actually what happens, it's what they do with it. So I think of it as a false narrative, as opposed to a false flag. Because a false flag thing is about the operation, the military interaction, and the deception therein. But, the use of the media to push an agenda and public sentiment, to push legislation and all this kind of stuff, to me this is not the same as a false flag. This is a false narrative which is created from an event. Now the event itself may be a false flag event, but I think people often mix these two things together. This is my opinions, but this is how I see it. And also it's a buzzword that's that's been overused and causes, again, it's like being a conspiracy theorist, quote unquote. Whereas, I believe more that those that they call conspiracy theorists are generally conspiracy factualists. They may or may not have their facts correct, but they are certainly looking for facts and not theories.
James made this one up. I consider us public intelligence analysts.
This is also true because we are using mostly open source, open sources in order to resort what is going out into the consciousness.
Into the talking heads that deliver what to think.
Well, right. They're all on the same sort of agendas because, as we've probably covered on earlier shows here, most of them are controlled by the very same people.
Actually, I don't think we've covered that yet. I think we should do a show on that one day.
Oh, well, I can have fun with that for a little while because I can talk directly about how, CIA assets are placed at places like the New York Times and, and the major news networks and things like that. I mean, stuff that we know is part of the public record now.
But I'm sure that's all just a coincidence. I'm sure they're just working to help uncover intelligence.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, they're just gathering intelligence. Let us not forget that the CIA, who's involved in all of these adventures, seemingly, their initial charter, when President Truman signed it, was all about, the National Securities Act at that time was all about giving power to the Central Intelligence Agency for the collection of data. Doesn't that sound very familiar? Kind of like what the NSA does. But anyway, the NSA was also erected for the same purpose around the same time, but they were meant to keep track of radio transmissions, telephone calls, things like this. Of course, everybody ignores that as well. But moving forward, the CIA was initially brought into being in order to be a singular collection point for all of the government intelligence agencies and all of the government law enforcement agencies. It was meant to be a clearinghouse, a centralized place where all of the information could be gathered. They have far exceeded their own charter, in short. Now, so back to the SEAL Team 6 thing. Okay. Sorry, I get off track.
You're fine. We're getting good information out. I'd prefer getting a lot of good information out than getting a good amount of information out about a specific topic.
Yeah, see, I like to do that too because it gives it a context. So you're not just, screaming, and I've heard people basically just, screaming, Bin Laden didn't die during this time, and that's all there is to it. And you know what? I find that nearly as revolting as the people that are supporting the idea that the government told us the truth again. Because, look, it's an appeal to authority as opposed to asking people to look at these things for themselves and think for themselves. And I'm just not into that kind of groupthink where there's one leader who has been elected by I don't know who to be the meat puppet on the TV screen or on your internet videos or your sound bites or on your radio. It's not an effective way to truly understand and interact with your own world. So SEAL Team 6, the narrative is that they killed Bin Laden, they dumped him at sea, they're successful, they're heroes. Well, then we have the story being floated out there, all of these, great sort of heroic war stories. Look at the great Americans. We finally punished the evil boogeyman, Osama bin Laden. Obama gets on TV and says, "I'm proud to announce to the American people that that we finally got bin Laden. We killed him in Pakistan, which, like I said, in 2002 I was aware of where the guy was myself." But it takes 9 more years before Obama can get somebody.
In 2005, George W. Bush had him cornered in somewhere, I forget where, and George Bush let him go.
Well, that's the Tora Bora incident I was talking about, I believe.
Okay, I'm not sure. That might have been the Tora Bora. He pulled out. He ordered his troops to pull out.
Yeah, well, they couldn't find him. In a secured mountain area, they surrounded like a canyon area, and couldn't find him in the canyon, even though they had supposedly pursued him and his Taliban allies to this place, and the remainder of his ragtag mujahideen. Okay, whatever. I just don't even know what to make of that story because how does the 6'6" Saudi Arabian with a dialysis machine, all of the equipment that he would require to keep his satellite phone and videotapes and audio tapes running and everything else, not to mention food, people, blah, 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 weaponry, how does he escape with all that stuff and just sort of walk through like the Invisible Man with, the ostensibly greatest military power in the world encircling him? Well, good luck on that one. If you can figure it out, please email me.
He's like Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie about the thief.
Oh yeah. Yeah, or those scenes in The Man in the Iron Mask where they where they turn around and they actually slip out the one Louis for the other Louis. Anyway, it's silliness, I know, but hey, look, I need a break once in a while. So SEAL Team 6, all right, now this formerly elite secretive unit is now part of the public discourse. Okay, fine, but then another strange thing happens. All of a sudden, they are summarily wiped out. The majority of the team was killed during a helicopter crash, and the strangest thing in the world to me is the type of helicopter that crashed. Not going too deeply into this, I mean, it's supposedly a Chinook helicopter which crashed. There is no reason in the world for Navy Special Forces or any asset of the Navy to be on a Chinook helicopter, because those things are used by the National Guard.
I thought it was the Coast Guard.
The Coast Guard also uses them, but either way, the Navy doesn't use these. If the Navy was going to send out an elite group to do anything, including take a ride somewhere, and they're all together, so they're obviously doing something together, they use Apaches and things like this. It's the wrong kind of helicopter. So the wrong kind of helicopter crashes in the wrong place and kills our new superheroes, right? I mean...
Talk about either that's a very strange coincidence and just bad timing, or bad timing and was planned.
Yeah, but how often does convenience and coincidence often lead to the logical step where we understand that it's part of the conspiracy?
Okay. If you want another example of convenience, go look at the 9/11 Commission and explain to me why these hijackers, quote unquote, had passports on domestic planes, and those passports were the only way to verify who they were, and the only things to survive the explosion.
Oh yeah, well there was one that survived. I don't know about all of them surviving, but there was one.
No,
that
the
survived.
passports, I mean.
You know, there was one passport that survived that I know of. I don't know about the rest. I think
The
some documentation was left behind and all this other stuff. Again, a very sort of shoddy storyline that you can't really assemble into a coherent stream of thought.
I'm a movie writer, and that's a terrible script.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. It becomes a rather terrible story arc, doesn't it? It's very convoluted. One thing you don't want to do is confuse your audience completely. You may
Well,
want to trick them a little, leave out some details, fill in the blanks later. But my friend, if you give them completely, opposing story arcs,
and
you
that,
know,
and then you say, "This is how it is." Ignore all these different plot holes, but this is how it is,
yeah,
and that's my dad.
no problem. It's almost as bad as the Highlander series. At first deciding that these guys were all born on
Hey,
Earth and then sending them to the planet Zeist.
the Highlander movies were great.
Yeah, but did you ever see the version where they, the second Highlander, where now they're supposedly aliens as opposed to being born throughout history on the planet Earth?
Yeah, the Highlander series were good movie. Well, the first one was good. The second one is one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Right. I mean, so bad that it was the only thing that I ever saw where they turned around and redacted in whole most of the storyline regarding that whole planet Zeist deal.
Yeah, but still, it's still a better script than the Osama Bin Laden narrative.
Well, maybe so, but you know what? Don't forget the third movie where you have those twins on those floating things, and now there's no explanation for those guys having time traveled. So
Well, yeah, it's kind of like Groundhog Day.
yeah, but when they cut down the second Highlander into the Renegade version, they still left the third one with that other crap going on. You don't know what the hell happened.
And we lost our last viewer.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, I just like talking here.
It's okay. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I like talking about movies, as you can tell.
Oh yeah, we could do movie stuff, just a whole show on that sometime. Every time we go into this pop culture stuff, though, we drop viewers. I love it. It's hysterical. I don't know where they go, but there they go.
Eh.
So let's just finish out the story. So SEAL Team 6 has then disappeared, just as the Bin Laden corpse has disappeared. We end up with the the movie narrative of it. We have the movie, which is literally called SEAL Team 6, which supposedly tells this story of this operation. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what they called the operation and what they called Bin Laden and everything else, but it really doesn't matter because it's just very much like, okay, now that we've confused the crap out of you, here is the actual story, and we'll present it in Hollywood form so that you guys can have something to hold on to and to fixate on. And this is the truth.
The special effects, though, are pretty impressive, too, with these guys.
Oh, yeah, not bad. Not bad. And I'm not going to say that a lot of stuff that comes out of Hollywood isn't entertaining.
I'm not talking about Hollywood, but I'm talking about the narrative. The special effects are pretty good.
Oh yeah, but that was my point about bringing up the PAL to NTSC problem and everything else. Actually, when they did these videos that were released to Al Jazeera, I hold up my fingers in air quotes again, because if you notice now, they're an international news agency. They suddenly grew from this, this Arabic nation. I forget where they were based originally. I got to think about that a minute. But they were based in some very small Arabic nation. They may have had a bureau in like Tajikistan or something at one point. I think they were out of Qatar or Gutter, which is spelled with a Q over there. I think that's where they might have come out of. But they obviously got a whole lot of corporate funding after doing this job on Bin Laden, after disseminating these supposed forbidden tapes that could potentially contain all of these imageries, signals to terrorists, possible secret messages to sleeper cells, all this stuff that they were supposedly handling in such a dangerous fashion, and now you can get them as a cable option just like CNN, Fox, or anything else. And if you don't believe me, then just go ahead and type into a search engine Al Jazeera America. You know, and I've even known people that have been on their shows, and now they have a nice headquarters in New York City and everything else. Okay. So, moving forward, we're to believe that this guy was assassinated by these special forces guys, dumped in the ocean. That's the end of the story, and everything else. But it still leaves all these questions. And these are the types of questions that you and I and Marianne, I think, were talking about yesterday.
Yes.
And what it comes down to is we don't really know when this guy was sick. We don't really know when this guy actually died. We don't really know whose side he was actually on, except for the fact that we do know at one point he was on our side. Now, I don't cling to that as if it's a big deal, because it seems as though, you know, every time we need an enemy, if we don't have one that we can import from somewhere else, we just decide that one of the guys who we have been working with all along is our new enemy.
Well, to be fair, Chuck, usually we stop backing somebody when they get rid of their centralized banking system, or when the Federal Reserve nudges us and says, hey, we need some money, go invade here and put another bank.
Well, yeah, when you're talking about people like Gaddafi and all that, which, you know, if you want to see a video on that, you can look at I have a series of videos where Gaddafi's making statements about the JFK assassination shortly before he was killed. If you want to see that, and with the English translations and everything else.
Eventually, I plan on doing a show just about Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein.
Well, I suggest you watch, there's a documentary that Showtime just had out. It's called, like, The Mad Butcher or something like this. And it is the most propaganda-laden thing I've ever seen. You know, in his country, at one point, he was a strong man and all that, and did overthrow previously so-called legitimate government. But his defiance of the international bankers is a very serious key to why it was time for him to go down. But when it comes to Bin Laden, it's got nothing to do with the international bankers necessarily, because the guy didn't have a central bank. He didn't have a nation that he had control of, so far as we know. He had this small group of guys that were working with all sorts of intelligence assets from around the world, mostly armed with machine guns and things like this. This is why the idea of the low-tech attack was so palatable to people, because he was, you know, after all, a guy in the desert with an AK-47. We've all been treated to those images where he's kneeling down and shooting the AK. You know what I mean? So it was a lot more believable to say that his men, by his direction and his, you know, fundamentalist dogma, followed and committed suicide, you know, on behalf of Allah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it does, yeah, it's true, though, that every time a person who is the ostensive head of a regime, who is supposed to be a dictator or supposed to be a president or a leader of their country, every time they do defy the international bankers, they do pay for it with regime change.
Let's look at an interesting list of people without a centralized bank. I'm sure you know this list already, Chuck. North Korea, Syria, Russia, China, Iceland, and Iran.
Yeah, China I would argue about, because
Yeah, I think you could make the argument.
Yeah, and the Russian Federation as it stands is changing their monetary policy as we speak.
Oh yeah, that can be a show right there.
Yeah, but
because that'll be the end of the dollar.
Well, they're already in a very sort of incremental way removing the you know, the strength of what they call the petrodollar, which is that, you know, all oil transactions, all energy transactions throughout the world are made based on dollar amounts. Okay, which is why the dollar has remained strong. It's because it's one of the best international currencies to have traded up until recent history. But that is no longer the case, because now we're seeing alliances between people like China, Russia, Germany, Syria, And they're turning around and deciding that they're going to trade in their own currencies, or they're going to use the Chinese, the yuan, or whatever it is.
I
There's
think they're
two.
using the ruble.
What's that?
I think they're planning to use the ruble.
Well, it looks the ruble is a good candidate because it is rumored to have been gold backed at this point. But
I'm
the
pretty
yuan,
sure it is.
well, right, but the yuan. But see, here's the thing: I don't know what to trust coming out of there anyway. I mean, I've seen enough stuff with Russia Today to question any of their propaganda arms as it is. But I mean, when you're looking at concerns like China, who owns a whole lot of the Federal Reserve debt, I mean, the quantities are astounding. But they are very slowly sort of extracting themselves from that business at this point.
Oh yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the day, not today, but when they're dumping it all, I wouldn't be surprised if they told the U.S. to pay back the debt.
Well, yeah, that's a possibility, but I think that the fact that they're doing it incrementally really speaks to the idea that they don't want to lose, their entire investment. I think they know that their investment is not going to pay back like it should, but I think if they turned around and suddenly dumped it all onto the market, it would devalue the dollar very, very fast, and they wouldn't be able to sell it for very much. So I think, just from a sort of loss prevention standpoint, they don't want to necessarily, because some people are afraid that they're just going to rather suddenly shocking all of the American economy by dumping that debt out there or demanding that it be repaid or anything else. But this is not the MO of people that do stuff like this.
No, they would probably just dump it slowly in increments, like a trillion here, trillion there.
Right, which is exactly what we're seeing. And again, when they're going to have partnerships with the Russian Federation and so on, it gives a whole new context to what's going on, over there right now in the Ukraine. Because why is it that we're even paying attention? Why is it we're involving ourselves, interjecting ourselves? Because of the newer NATO nations that we have agreements with? I don't think so. I think it's got a lot more to do with trying to make a little bit of an international threat against those who could really do serious harm to the American economy in no longer in slow motion, but in real time or quick time. So I think that's what's going on there. Is we're watching the play back and forth between that. See, because the thing with Putin is, I don't think that he has the same puppet masters as our supposed leaders do. It seems as though he's more vested with people that don't really care about the same agenda as say the Obamas, the Clintons, the Bushes, So that's just the way I see that. But the Bin Laden thing, I've got to say this: that to me there is no real clear storyline here. You can assemble it many different ways. One thing that we know for sure, though, is that the general sort of concepts that are being floated to us by our media in this country and in the Western world are full of more holes than in your average block of Swiss cheese, for sure. So, I invite everybody to look at these things themselves, try and examine it for themselves, try not to get trapped in rabbit holes like, like I said, like that Fat Bin Laden tape or the audio tapes that are unclear and illegible documents that have been released, whether they be electronic or paper, because I think it's all meant to confuse us and to keep us off of the real story. And meanwhile, if you want to sort it out, they'll give you a Hollywood movie to get you to understand it. And that's what we've seen. So, what do you think about all that?
I'm trying to process a bit.
Yeah, I understand, and that's what I'm about, and that's why I really I do appreciate, like I said, stuff like Webster Tarpley did about this, and And again, Mike Rupert's public work on it as well, because they explained a lot of very interesting stuff where you can see, international business interests, why it was a good thing to sort of demonize, a sort of safe character. Whatever happened to the hijackers that used to be, that would take planes to different locations. I say this all the time. There was a guy that was supposed to be, one of the most feared terrorists in the world, named Imad Mughniyeh at one point. He disappeared after being part of the legend for a long time. There's no longer any Cuban terrorists because they're not a convenient target for anything. There's no longer any Iranian struggle directly because the American public wouldn't back it. And I think even the neocons realized exactly how silly it was to take on another regime-building exercise like we did in Iraq. But we're still kicking the fence when it comes to Syria, when it comes to the Russian Federation, et cetera, et cetera. And, the whole Korean deal is a joke as far as I'm concerned. So, if Dennis Rodman can go over there and make friends with the dictator and be part of the discussion, I mean, what does that tell you? So it doesn't bode well for the real narrative, the real truth about what's going on. Islamo-fascist, Islamo-terrorists, Islamic-based fundamentalists, all these things, I think are just quite a bit part of the fairy tale. They're just many, many different